Amanda is my brother's girlfriend. At the time of this story, she was looking for her first apartment and moving out from her parents' house. Her and my brother didn't want to move in together since they had only dated for a few months. She opted instead to search for a roommate online. Browsing Craigslist, she found an ad titled something like, "Roommate wanted, females only." This sort of thing was common since the area she was looking in was mostly young professionals. The listing was for a room in a house for about $225 a month, which was quite cheap compared to most places listed. The occupant listed herself as a 23-year-old college student that wasn't comfortable living with any males. The other roommate would have their own room and attached bathroom. So far, Amanda was into the place. However, the listing only had a single photo from outside the property. Amanda sent an email wanting to meet the occupant and tour the house. Within 30 minutes, she receives an email back with all the details and time to stop by. The girl worked late hours and wanted Amanda to stop by at 8 p.m. When Amanda arrives, there's a handwritten note on the front door saying, "Door broken, use back door." Walking around the house, it looks nice but slightly unkempt. Tall grass, weeds, dusty windows, etc. Still, no alarms for Amanda though. When she knocks on the back door, and an older man opens the door. At first, Amanda thinks she has the wrong house, but the man reassures her and says that the occupant was out, and he was the landlord. The occupant asked him to meet Amanda since she was working late. He seemed pleasant and offered to show her around. Alarms start going off, but aren't red alert yet. First, the guy was clearly in his 40s, unshaven, and looked like he lived in his car. Also, only the kitchen light was on. As they walked around the house, Amanda noticed one huge red flag. No furniture. Nothing. The landlord was polite about answering questions, but seemed irritable to keeping lights on for too long, rushing her around and only letting her look at rooms for a few moments. There was a single room that the landlord wouldn't open, telling her that it was the occupant's room and he didn't want to invade her privacy. As they walked down the hallway into the living room, she notices the front door has a plank nailed across it. Broken, for sure. Amanda's creepometer is starting to ding, so she decides to wrap up the walkthrough and leave, but trying to be polite. As she's giving the guy her "thanks for the showing" bit, he perks up and states that he forgot to show her the basement. It's recently furnished and would be a great rec room, and she should take a look down there. At the time, Amanda and the landlord are standing in the small hallway between the front living room and the back kitchen. In this little hallway was the basement door. When he opens the door, it opens outward to create something of a barrier between Amanda and the back door. The basement is pitch black. He smiles, motions down the stairs, and says,
"Ladies first."
What happens next is nothing more than a stroke of luck. Amanda got a text just as some random person parks in front of the house. Thinking on her feet, she pretends it's a phone call and answers her phone. "Hey, yeah, are you here? I'll come out from around back. I'll let you in. It's great. You have to see it." With a motion of confidence, she excuses herself from around the landlord and walks out the back door. She says the guy just looked at her like he was confused. Once outside, she sprinted to her car and sped like hell out of there. When Amanda got home, she told her mother and my brother everything. Cops were called, they took her statement, and went to investigate. The Craigslist post had been removed. The house had been foreclosed over 6 months earlier and the property had been abandoned. When the police investigated, they found that the closed room the landlord didn't want her to look in was where the man had been staying. There was a pile of dirty old blankets, rotten food, and empty gallon jugs everywhere. More creepy was he had plastered ripped up pages from porno magazines all over the walls. The really scary part of this was the basement. The man had tied a thin piece of fishing twine at about shin level across the stairs about halfway down. The basement was empty, except for another pile of old blankets, a broom handle wrapped in leather belts, and a small box with a few rolls of assorted tape. My name's Tom, and I live in the St. Louis area, and this is a horror story about something that happened to me that almost fucked up my life forever. When I was 21 years old, I broke up with my first ever serious girlfriend, who I had been together with for 8 months. Needless to say, I was devastated. I fell into a deep depression and began abusing painkillers and Xanax really heavily, and I began looking for any chick I could rebound with. I ended up looking on the personal section on Craigslist and found an ad for a girl named Stephanie. I began talking to her, and I arranged for her to come pick me up one night. We had intercourse that night and decided to make it a regular thing. She was an older lady, about 35, and a bigger girl, but she had her own apartment and enough money to keep me loaded on as much drugs and alcohol as I wanted. To be honest, I kind of used this lady and used her as my sugar mama, for lack of a better word. After a while, she grew really attached to me and started to want a more serious relationship. Eventually, she started dropping hints about wanting to get married. She said she wanted to do this to help me out so she could get me on her insurance so I can get help for my drug and alcohol problem, which I refused to consider. One day, we got into a big argument, and she told the police that I had been abusing her and got a temporary restraining order on me. A week after she did this, she called me crying her eyes out, saying, "Please forgive me and I love you," and all this other stuff, and said she wanted to come pick me up, buy me some dope and alcohol, and get me something to eat. And being the addict I am, I of course accepted. From the moment she picked me up, I noticed that she was acting kind of odd. She was usually really talkative and was always on my ass wanting to talk to me about this and that, but on this day, she was oddly quiet. When we got back to her apartment after I walked in, she immediately pushed me on the couch and pulled my pants down and began giving me head. Then she climbed on top of me and began riding me, and she seemed angry when I didn't come inside her. I had been getting bad vibes off of her the whole night, so after this happened, I immediately asked her for a ride back home, which she quickly agreed to. After I got dropped off at the house, I went inside and sat down with my sister to watch some SpongeBob with her. About 10 minutes after I was home, I got a call on the phone. I picked up the phone, and to my surprise, a lady on the other end said, "This is the St. Louis County Police Department. We're going to need you to come outside to talk to you." I ran downstairs and hid my weed and my pills, and then walked outside to figure out what the hell was going on. When I walked outside, there were about 7 different cops on my porch, and they were all pointing tasers and guns at me. One of them hit me on the back of my leg with a nightstick and put me on the ground, and I was handcuffed. The cops then talked to my mom and got permission to go inside of the house, where they took a drug dog and began doing a thorough search of my room and my basement area. None of the cops on the scene would tell me what was going on. They told me I would have to talk to the detective at the station. When I got to the police station, I had a bombshell dropped on me. Apparently this lady had accused me of kidnapping her and raping her. She told the police she had come by my house to return some of my stuff because we had broken up. She then said that I had a knife and that I had come out holding a knife to her throat and forced my way into the vehicle and told her to take me back to her apartment, and I raped her repeatedly. Thankfully, I had remembered that we made a couple stops on the way to her apartment. She had gone inside of a gas station to get a couple packs of cigarettes with me, so there was no way that I could have kidnapped her. The police still swabbed my dick for DNA, and they also took my clothes for evidence, and I was forced to spend the night in the St. Louis County Jail. wearing nothing but hospital scrubs. I was released the next morning, but my ordeal was far from over. This lady began constantly stalking me. She would call me every night at odd times, from blocked numbers, and either crying into the phone or just begging to talk to me. I also began seeing her vehicle quite a lot in the neighborhood, even though she lives nowhere close to me. I called the police about this a couple of times, but they didn't really seem to care. They told me I would have to go to get a restraining order on her in order to make it stop. I wanted nothing to do with the court system, though. I wanted nothing to do with the court system because I did have a criminal record, and just decided to ignore her and hope that the problem would go away. After a couple months, she finally did stop bothering me as much. However, to this day, I sometimes get calls at 2 or 3 in the morning from blocked numbers, and every new girlfriend I get, she messages them on Facebook and tells them how I raped her. Moral of the story? Be careful who you meet online, whether you're a guy or a girl. All it takes is one crazy person to completely ruin your life.